Hello, I'm Dean Orrico, President of Middlefield Capital, and I'm really happy to be joined today by Marty Staples, who is the President and CEO of Topaz Energy. Marty joined Topaz when the company was launched in 2020, but he actually spent over 10 years with its predecessor company, Tourmaline, because Topaz was actually spun out of Tourmaline Oil last year. And at his time at Tourmaline, he was responsible for really helping grow the business into one of the leading natural gas producers in North America. Now, we've known Tourmaline and its CEO, Mike Rose, since the company was launched. But in the last few months, we've actually started buying shares of Topaz Energy. And that's why we've asked Marty to join us today, because we want him to give us an overview of Topaz. And it is a unique business that we seldom find in the energy sector here in Canada. So maybe with that, Marty, give us some background on Topaz, and again, why it is a unique business, and then maybe also touch on how you see the growth of Topaz over time and how you see that growth evolving. Over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Dean, and thanks to the Middlefield Group for spending some time with Topaz today. Like you mentioned, I was at Tourmaline, and that is Canada's largest natural gas producer now. I was there since almost inception, saw the company grow from 3,000 to 300,000 BOE per day. It's sitting around 430,000 BOE per day now, so quite large in scale. They've been very active on the M&A front, and about 2 years ago, November 2019, Mike Rose kind of saw this generational M&A opportunity coming to, and I think you've seen the consolidation effort that's happened in North America over the last couple of years. What we wanted to do was create a way to participate in this M&A opportunity, and we thought Topaz would be a very unique way to do that. Topaz was founded to basically function as capital to put in to help Tourmaline to acquire different assets. So what we created out of Topaz is a very high quality, low risk royalty and infrastructure business. That's underpinned by our investment grade sponsor, Tourmaline. That was the formative deal that we did back in November of 2019. Very focused on growing our free cash flow, paying reliable and sustainable dividends to our shareholders. We do this through very strategic partnerships that highlight our economic value and ESG foundation. That's in order to enhance our value proposition to shareholders. In Topaz, what we've created and assembled is energy assets related to different mixes. We're about 70% overriding royalties and 30% infrastructure revenue, all under long-term take-or-pay contracts in length of 10 to 15 years. 78% of our infrastructure is covered by those long-term contracts. Topaz currently has 70% of his revenue, like I mentioned, derived from our GORR on over 4.3 million acres of land. We anticipate a minimum of 18 rigs on our lands as of July 1st, so we're going to be very active. In 2020, we had almost 10% of the horizontal drilling fleet on our royalty lands, which I don't think you can replicate in North America. The other part of our business, 30% of our revenue is from non-operated infrastructure assets. All non-operated, that's very important to us. We have a staff of 4 full-time people here, 3 consultants. That allows us to participate in non-operated facilities. We don't require the human capital. We own in 5 gas processing facilities where we have 215 million a day of processing capacity. 78% of that, like I mentioned, is under long-term fixed take-or-pay contracts in length of 10 to 15 years. We do have natural hedges to inflation built into some of our contracts, so we do see the whole business as a hedge against inflation. Additionally, we completed a water infrastructure transaction, the first of its kind in North America. We have a 15-year take-or-pay contract on water handling. So it's water sourcing, storage, and disposal after the water is used. And it's non-potable water, so it is very ESG friendly. Historically, a lot of operators would take fresh water and use it for fracking operations. We're using non-potable water, making sure we handle it properly, all pipeline connected, less trucks on the road, something that we're very proud of. And then on the M&A front, we've been very active. As of July 1st, we'll have completed over $733 million in transactions in just under a year. That's going to generate significant EBITDA, $84 million, which represents 94% of our 2020 EBITDA. So that's translated to significant growth for Topaz.
It's a fascinating story because I don't think we've seen a business like Topaz that actually is combining an infrastructure business together with this royalty business. And as you say, Marty, really, you're not operating either segment of the business. You're just basically a capital provider. So was this something that you had really envisaged when you were at Tourmaline? You wanted to create a company like this? Or was it something where Tourmaline says, we need to raise some capital, so let's create this spin-off Topaz vehicle?
Yeah, it was a combo of both. I mean, Tourmaline had been approached a number of times by different midstream operators to try and nameplate their facility. And what I mean by that, historically, any midstream company would come in and want everything from your gas plant to your pipeline. So what we are looking at is different ideas around that form. And Tourmaline has 21 facilities. They have over 700 kilometers of pipeline all in the ground. The way Tourmaline was able to kind of flourish through low commodity cycles was by owning their infrastructure. What we allowed other operators to do, Advantage was the first company we did a transaction with in Glacier. So we took a 12.5% non-op interest in the facility. We don't pay maintenance capital or OPEX for 15 years, and we essentially get a 12% return on it. So yeah, it's something that we envisioned. We saw that capital was drying up in the energy space or just harder to access. And Tourmaline didn't want to raise equity. They didn't want to take on more debt, but they still wanted to participate in this generational M&A opportunity.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So clearly, part of Topaz's success will really depend on the success at Tourmaline, because you basically got this royalty interest on Tourmaline lands. And for those people who are less familiar with the royalty business, basically Topaz isn't doing any of the drilling. They're just relying on Tourmaline to successfully drill that land, and then Topaz earns a royalty interest on the production generated by Tourmaline's activity. So explain to me why you think that's actually a good strategy for Topaz, and really touching on, where you see Tourmaline's success in drilling these lands over time.
Yeah, and from our opinion too, I mean, I'll just start, like, we think Tourmaline's in the best parts of the basin, and we'll touch on that a little bit later, but the benefits are very unique as a royalty entity, that we can provide a reliable 5-year outlook on our base score, and that's through Tourmaline's 5-year plan. They provide a 5-year plan in their corporate deck that grows at 3 to 5% annually. So we actually can show growth in our royalty business on the back of Tourmaline. Since then, we haven't just done transactions with Tourmaline. We also have 6 other counterparties that we work with, Tamarack Valley, Headwater, Advantage, NuVista, and then 2 private companies named Catapult and Crestwine. We've done 3 transactions with Tamarack Valley as well to get us bigger in one of the most economic oil plays in North America, and that's the Clearwater oil play. But there is success for both companies through M&A growth, and I'll touch back on Tourmaline. With our model, Topaz has allowed Tourmaline to participate in this opportunity that we saw in front of us of consolidation. We provided a unique form of capital to Tourmaline that we don't think they would have allowed them to participate to the capacity that they did. When you think about growth that they've seen over the last 2 years, they've added almost 200,000 BOE per day. They were a 300,000 BOE per day company. They're going to exit 2022 at 500,000 BOE per day, and that's mainly gas. There is no other royalty company that's tied to gas, which we think is the best transitional fuel, fossil fuel around. Having Tourmaline as a sponsor, an investment grade sponsor, if you look at any criteria of a royalty co or an infrastructure co, that's the first thing on anybody's list. Find an investment grade sponsor to align with. Not only are we going to see Tourmaline show significant growth, but with Topaz acquiring interest in other counterparties, we're going to see additional growth. So I mentioned their 3 to 5% growth on their corporate deck. We see about 5 to 6% growth on our royalty production alone.
So you touched on a few things there, Marty, that I want to expand on. Specifically, this concept that natural gas is a transitional source of energy. And we all know that clearly there is a movement that's going to happen over time to cleaner energy. But this point of transition is critical, because that's not going to happen immediately. It's going to be a gradual transition. And why do you think natural gas is this ideal transitional source of energy? And I also want you to touch on why you think maybe the LNG Canada project is important, and maybe explain LNG Canada as well when you get into that part of the answer.
Yeah, so I've been in gas. That's kind of been my forte my whole career. I've only worked for predominantly gas companies. We've always thought gas was the transitional fuel. There's increasing global demand as that transitional fuel. It's the cleanest fossil fuel around. So I hope one of these days I'm right. The gas is, and I think we're getting closer to that. LNG, you're seeing step up right now. LNG Canada should be ready mid-decade, which is a project of 1.9 BCF, which can be expanded to 4 BCF. And there's walls going up there right now. That's kind of by mid-decade. Very important from the coal transition. Natural gas is going to be instrumental to that. It's the main source of power in Alberta. It's instrumental in hydrogen advancement. If you think about hydrogen production globally, it uses natural gas as feedstock via steam reformation. Hydrogen is essentially tied to the natural gas business in a very significant way. LNG is completely important to the world. It's, like I mentioned before, the cleanest burning fossil fuel. And by displacing coal, it's one of the best ways to reduce global CO2 emissions. The Canadian ESG regulatory standards are among the best in the world. It's really important to be tied to this. I look at kind of just even in Alberta, Topaz is the only North American royalty company that's levered to natural gas. We're very bullish given the significant reduction in supply over the past few years as a result of limited access to capital that we talked about before. So I really just kind of see gas stepping up into a bigger picture over this decade.
Yeah, it is interesting because at Middlefield, we run a number of energy-focused funds as well as diversified funds, and we really do believe that the future is all about cleaner and renewable energy, but that's not going to happen over time. And there is a place in one's portfolio for transitional energy stories like Topaz alongside some of these renewable plays, because companies like Topaz, we think, can really add a lot of value in that they are cash flow producers, pay high dividends, which I want to touch on a little later. But before we get to that, Marty, talk a little bit about ESG. We know that this has become an important element for investors, for societies, for companies. So maybe explain a little bit how Topaz is going to meet its ESG objectives. And as you say, as a capital provider, can you exert some influence over these natural gas producers that you're providing capital to earn royalty income from, insofar as making sure they're also becoming more ESG compliant?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something that, the board that we formed is very focused on ESG. Topaz really believes the fact that Canada provides clean, affordable, and ethical energy to the world it's something to be proud of. And that's why we have focused our main acquisition strategy, or all of our acquisition strategy, in Canada. We don't conduct any oil and gas operations. We're not responsible for the emissions or abandonment and reclamation obligations associated with oil and gas operations. So we already screen well from an ESG standpoint. But one of the things that we wanted to focus on is how do we ensure the parties that we decide to partner with also screen well. And that's something that we developed with our board. We have an ESG kind of criteria that we put in place. And so we rank every company that we look at potential M&A opportunities with and how it screens from an ESG standpoint. So we want to place capital alongside operators that are good stewards of environment, both land, air, wind, water. We talked about the water transaction that we did and found a way to not only enhance, I think, the way operations are done, but also find profit in it. The way that we've put this water project together, it's better for the operator. They're paying less costs. There's less transportation. You're using non-potable water. So that was important. Some other things that we've done, and when I think about Tourmaline, they've won awards recently for water displacement and particularly diesel displacement. They just signed a deal with a major frac spread company called Trican, where they are actually displacing diesel to use natural gas in all their fracking operations in Northeast BC. So you're slowly seeing those emissions come down. And I think what the important part of this is it's actually profitable for companies to do these things. So that's something that we're very mindful of. From a corporate governance standpoint, one thing we like to talk about too, because that's part of the ESG theme, we do have these related party transactions, and we've put together an independent board to deal with those. We saw some of the mistakes that were made with some of these kind of so-called drops with sponsors. We wanted to put an independent framework together to ensure that there was complete transparency in any type of inter-party transactions.
Well, it's clear that the energy sector has to start catching up with these ESG objectives, and it's great to see that Topaz is making significant strides in that regard. And the last point I want to raise is really back to the fundamentals at Topaz, because at Middlefield, we are focused on companies that can pay and grow dividends over time. So maybe just speak to that on behalf of Topaz, Marty, why you think that is a type of company that you're building there and would really be suitable for equity income investors like Middlefield.
Yeah, like I mentioned before, Topaz grows at about 5 to 6% per year. We've always wanted to have a payout ratio between 60 to 90%, so we can use free cash flow to participate in additional M&A. So we just don't want a stagnant story. We're growing right now. We're going to keep continuing to grow, and we're using free cash flow to do that. So we're at about a 64% payout ratio pro forma July 1st after we complete these transactions. We want to use free cash flow to participate in M&A, but we also want to find ways to increase our dividends. So we are at the lower end of that payout ratio. We just did a 5% dividend increase. We went from 80 cents a share to 84 cents a share. And as further M&A opportunity happens, I really see an opportunity for dividend increases. And so it's not going to be dramatic. I think we want to step it up. We want to make sure, I mentioned early on, having a reliable and sustainable dividend. We're going to avoid any type of variable dividends in this business. We want the investor to be sure that the dividend they've invested into is there. When you think about the royalty deals we have in place, we've put capital commitments on top of them. We have $600 million in capital commitments on our new royalty deals. That's in addition to Tourmaline's $1.2 billion capital budget. You couple that with the take-or-pay contracts. 78% of our take-or-pay are under infrastructures under take-or-pay contracts. The other 22% is fully utilized right now. It really insulates our dividend. And that's the main goal here, is ensuring that that dividend is as solid as it gets.
Well, it's clear, Marty, you're ticking a lot of boxes because you've got a business that has some real embedded growth, both organically and through acquisition. You've got a dividend that I think is certainly important to investors like ourselves because there's a real lack of high quality dividend product that's going to grow over time. And you're also making great strides on ESG. So listen, keep up the good work, and we'll certainly be following the story very closely as shareholders. Thanks for joining us today.